anything that we couldn't get in California. And 5 years ago, that was a lot of stuff we couldn't get in California. And one day he's like, hey, have you ever tried mead? And I was like, I don't know what that is. You need to fill out this, this box. Go ahead and throw something in there. And he sent me one of those nip bottles of bourbon barrel French toast from Kunin. And
I love that
so after that,
stuff is so good.
Well, and this was back when they would do the March Meadness, and like every day they were releasing something new. So at the end of the month, he'd be like, here's a case of 12, just like random stuff. And it was these like flavor profiles I had never had before. They did like the mint julep, right? Like the bourbon barrel aged with mint. They had a pomegranate pie mint. They had like all these things that beer wasn't doing out here. You weren't getting those flavor profiles with wine. You weren't getting that flavor development. And when I say we started making stuff out of necessity, it really was like, we can't get this distributed. It's not, those small bottles we were getting weren't mass produced.
Nobody can get Kunin, I mean, that's, they make those little 175s and like you have to go there to get them or be at the Mazer Cup when there's leftovers.
Right? So I was like, well, how can, I can get great beer around here, but that's not what I want. I want something different. So we started experimenting, and 4 years later, we had an opportunity to say, we're at a space now where if we wanted to take a chance and do something, we're comfortable. And, I didn't want to have that realization 10 years from now and say, like, I had this chance to do something and I didn't do it. So, why not?
Yeah, I totally hear you. So where are you guys at now in the process? Are you licensed now, or what's the story?
So right now, we started the same way as Mediocrity did, which is doing custom crushes and functioning as our own distributor. Over the past 2 weeks, we've started working with our real estate company to help us find a spot. So we're hoping that, hopefully by the end of this month, we're going to be able to go ahead and start to lease out our own spot, start to draw out plans, and then submit our TTB for our O2 license. So it all happened really quickly. We did our first crush with Golden Coast, bottled those. Like I said, I grew up in an area where you put everything in a barrel in some form, so we did our first batch and split that into 2 barrels also. So ended up with 3 meads out of our first crush. We pitched another one on Friday that we're going to be serving at the Orange County Brewers Guild Invitational. We'll keep going along that distribution route until we get our license. So hopefully we can keep building up the company brand. We can build a good profile of meads to offer once we're actually open between now and then. So there isn't like this stagnant, we started, we're waiting to build out, now we're open. Just kind of keep the mead flowing.
Was there a particular mead that you made that you said, this is the one that I know I can be commercial?
Yes, and it was one of those ones where it took longer to develop than I was expecting, and it actually ended up being my wife's favorite too. When our son was born 3 years ago, the weekend when we came home from the hospital, I made a sicer with like fresh juice down from Julian and added kumquats to it. And after about 6 months, the way that developed, I had people at work like asking me, how much did you make? And like, can you bring us any more? And from there on, like work parties, we'd bring kegs in, and just all the homebrew stuff we're doing. And I like that one was the tipping point where it went from, it's something that I like to drink and maybe it's just me, so I'm making it for myself. And then we started to get all these other people asking us to, do it for their weddings or for birthday parties. And from there, it just kind of grew legs of its own and started running.
Did you find it challenging to move up in size when you were, to go from like the 5 or the 10 gallons to 40, 50 gallon? What was the hardest part of going big?
Well, luckily, doing the custom crush, working with Frank and Joe and Chris at Golden Coast, they helped walk me through a lot of the differences. The biggest I had done prior to our custom crush was 15 gallons. And 15 gallons for a regular person, that's a lot. but the first crush we did was 10 barrels. So it went from, these things I could push around the house if I needed to this big stainless steel beast with the, giant glycol system on the roof. And even just the way you end up, blending the honey, it's completely different. You're using tools that, you never thought you'd have to use before, at least you weren't exposed to. A lot of it is just, moving up in scale. It's like, oh, I have a giant pitcher to pitch my yeast now, or, I'm measuring out, for a test 3-barrel batch, 275 grams of ferment O instead of using a little, teaspoon measure. It's different, but I'm happy to say, I think the experience I had working with, somebody and having them show me the ropes and showing me how, a giant pump works and, their method of aeration versus what I was doing, that made the transition a lot easier and showed me a lot more of what was possible and, alternative ways to some of the steps that we take when we're doing homebrew.
Cool.
That is cool. Who was your first custom crush partner?
We've only done Golden Coast so far. One of the things we did explore, the drive for me is about 45 miles each way, and it can get kind of daunting if I leave during either of the rush hours, which is pretty much any time of the day.
Yeah. 24/7, right?
It can be pretty bad. So I explored some of the wineries that do exist in Temecula, or there are actually some in Orange County, off in the hills. But there was a lot of reluctance. It was kind of weird. There was a couple winemakers that actually met with me, and I tried to negotiate just let me lease out some space. I'll bring in my own hardware. We'll figure out a way to make it work. And there was a lot more resistance than I was expecting. I think Billy kind of ran into the same thing, or not Billy, Mark Oberle, when he was trying to start Mediocrity. They ended up doing a alternating proprietorship with I believe it's a cider maker. But they went through 50 wineries, and you'd get called back for maybe one or two. So I feel very fortunate that there was that opportunity that Frank gave me and gave Mark. It really did help us to, I don't want to say proof of concept, not that we were doubting ourselves, but to really help us make something on a wider scale to make sure that even our community was ready for it. And it was going to be something that was going to be a viable product. Without him, it would have been a much larger stab in the dark and a lot riskier for us.
Yeah. It's nice though that you've got. Seems like you've got some structure around you that is kind of helping you to get off on the right foot.
It's the community always seems a lot bigger from the outside, a lot more daunting from the outside. But once you're part of it, it really is a family. We have the 7 groups that are getting started right now, and what I found is it's not just about making mead direct. Really, anybody that ferments something. It's not, I don't want to call it a fraternity, but there's definitely this understanding and there's this camaraderie there. One of the things that we've done that I think has made a really big difference and helped us a lot was the Orange County Brewers Guild actually let us join, and they include us in a lot of the events that they do. So the marketing that they do for Beer Week, the meetings they have, even just the message boards where you can reach out and ask for, if you need to pitch a yeast or you need to borrow some hardware. I had to borrow a racking cane, and one of the breweries was just come by, it's clean and ready to go. Just bring it back whenever you need it to rack out of our barrels. Being able to find a group around you like that, it's made things a lot easier. Even when it comes to buying hardware or anything like that, we're buying some of our fermenters off of one of the breweries that's upscaling. So they're giving us this great deal because they know we're getting started, and they can appreciate also being in that same situation where you don't want to have to buy everything new if you don't have to. It's all going to work the same if everything's intact. And it's not easy, right? It's a really trying time, at least for the first little bit.
Speaking of equipment, since you've been moving into the pro world, is there any particular piece of equipment that you came across or that you started using once you went professional that you'd say this would be really cool for a home mead maker to have, and something that's accessible, or that would maybe make home mead making a little bit more easy or efficient or better?
That's a good question. There are a couple things that I think people can get that are relatively cheap that really do make life easier. When you're at home, you want to aerate and degas. Like a lot of people, they have a lot of different methods. Maybe they'll use a wine degasser. Maybe they'll use a paddle. But using something as simple as an aeration stone and hooking that up to a timer, if you're in a pinch, that'll do your aeration for you. There's what else? There's experiences I've had where at home maybe I didn't have time to sit there and wait for all of the bubbles or something like that to come out of my must when I'm checking gravity, and having a stir plate where you can just let it sit there for 15 or 20 minutes and degas so that you get an accurate reading, that actually does make a big difference. Like, it really does increase your accuracy and allow you to know where your meat is at any point in time. And maybe there's things that just I took for granted before, where I wasn't, it was a small batch, so if something happened, I wasn't that big of a deal. But now that I look back, I could have spent so much more time getting that accuracy really where it needed to be for production level, instead of now trying to reteach myself that I need to do these things over and over again to make sure that I'm creating a consistent product and having that consistent quality there.
Cool. Thanks.
When I was in LA just after the Cup and meeting you, I found this place just around the corner from where we're staying called Great Society Mead and Cider, which had a number of your meads there. I wanted to know just how hard is it to get your stuff out and in places like this?
So I think Great Society is kind of the outlier in that scenario, because as far as I know, they're the only bar that specializes in specifically mead and cider in Southern California, and they have 20 taps. I was actually just there yesterday dropping off another keg and a case of boxes, and their goal is 10 meads, 10 ciders, always on tap. And it's been kind of hard for them to keep up with the mead side. They usually have 7 or 8 and then compensate with a couple of extra ciders. That being said, it's been kind of difficult, at least for me in our area. Part of that comes down to just availability and me trying to learn that side of the business. The art part, creating something that you can drink, something that people are going to like, that's not as hard as transitioning over and trying to figure out how sales works, like learning all of the software that goes along with that. There's a lot of things that if you don't have an MBA or a sales background, there's a lot of things that you don't know. Yeah. One of the first times I went somewhere to pitch, serving our mead there, they were kind of in a rush. They're like, usually we do this by appointment, and I just happened to be in the area, so I walked in. Yes, that was totally my fault. I should have got an appointment. One of the things that, you didn't expect it to be that big of a deal, but it turns into. But as I'm walking out, she's like, okay, well, go ahead and leave me your pricing sheet, and then I'll give you a call. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I have one mead, and there's one price. I didn't think I needed to have a pricing sheet. So I go home, and I'm beating myself up about it. Why didn't I have a pricing sheet? I should have had this. I should have had the description of our company, how to contact us, how to order, what our pricing is, what your margin is, all this other stuff. And I'd have it in my head, but I didn't think to put it on a piece of paper. So that transition of trying to figure out how to sell something to somebody, that's been the hardest part. It hasn't been getting them to try the product or anything like that. It's just figuring out, it's a different language almost, to talk to somebody that owns a bar or a restaurant or something like that. Then it's not what I was expecting, and that's been my biggest struggle so far.
Yeah, that gets in, and then you start getting into things like channel management and store displays and how to sweet talk store managers and putting your stuff so it's not on the bottom shelf way at the end. And
I'm writing all these down. I didn't know all this stuff. Thanks, Vic. Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's what I do for
a
living.
You keep going.
So.
I'm not going to stop you.
I mean, well, and it's a little different. It's a little different from state to state, but there's just so many, and a lot of it depends too on how you package your product. I mean, if all you do is kegs and tap style stuff, then that's a whole different animal than if you're also bottling and going either through a distributor or direct